Well, good morning. Woo. Woo. Good morning, Watershed. My name is Kim Honeycutt, and I don't know what to do right now because I think the extra hour of sleep for Matt caused him to not feel comfortable making fun of me. He didn't say one negative thing about me, so I'm more comfortable with that than someone treating me well, so I'm trying to get adjusted up here. But y'all look great with extra hour of sleep. Congrats for that. Fantastic. So I'm going to but I'm going to talk about this series, Atlas of the Heart. But give me a second. I need to reflect first. This month is 1 year that my beautiful wife, Larissa, and I made this our home church, our spiritual community. Yeah. So grateful. Your warmness, your kindness, everything has just been absolutely amazing. And so before I get into this, I want to tell you some things in the past year that have changed, and two of them are really positive, and one, we'll talk about it. All right. So the first, that in this past year, that Brene Brown and I became best friends. And I know you're not going to believe me. I know how you people are. So we brought proof. So if they can go ahead and show that, we have proof that we're best friends now. She crashed our wedding. We weren't going to tell her no. So it was fine. She's a little too close to my wife, but that's all right. That's all right. So she really got entrenched in our lives, and so she became a part of our family. We have another picture of us with our adorable little dogs, who don't know they're dogs, by the way. They have no idea that they're dogs. But no, really, I have incredible respect for Dr. Brene Brown. I really do. She is absolutely phenomenal. So that's one amazing thing that's happened in the past year. The other one, as you know, is that I got to be a part of this teaching team. And I have the same respect for the people on this teaching team as I have with Dr. Brene Brown, because they're so intelligent and they're so compassionate in their hearts about spreading the word and teaching in such a beautiful way about Scripture and how to live in community, and I love that about them. The third thing that's been different is that, sadly, I've become soft. Since I got married and got around you people, you accepting, loving people, I went from feeling repressed to having lots of emotions. And I don't like that at all, whatsoever. And all three of those accumulated and collided with each other recently at a monthly teaching team meeting. So we're all in a meeting, and we get in there, and I pull up this Google document on that will have the series that are coming up, and you look to see where your name is and what date you're speaking. And so I see that this church is going to talk about Atlas of the Heart. And I read this book a year ago. And by read, I mean I looked at the pictures, and anything in bold, I read. It's close enough. Right, but they're going to talk about Dr. Brene Brown. Let me tell you why she's so important. So she's a researcher, and she's a shame expert. She's the reason why we talk about shame other places besides therapist offices. And so she has done phenomenal, because shame is an emotion, it's a belief, it's a thought, and it becomes behavior if it goes untreated. So knowing that we're sitting here and we're in a church that's willing to talk about this, I was thinking about the bold things in bold I read that were so amazing about, attachment versus connection and neuroscience and all this stuff, and I was so excited. And so we're talking as a group about what we know about the book and what resonates with us. And then Professor Sean, says, well, what stood out to me is that Brene Brown says there's 87 emotions. Girl. So because that's past my comfort zone, I said, well, actually, in the polyvagal theory, it's more about where you are in your sympathetic or parasympathetic ladder, and emotions are irrelevant because outside your story, emotions only last for 90 seconds, so we really don't need to talk about emotions. So what I did in that moment was I put on her my discomfort. She was comfortable, but I put my discomfort on top of her. And so later that day, at the end of my day, I do an inventory to see how many apologies I owe for my behavior throughout the day, because I have prefrontal cortex damage, and so I just say things just happen. So I was inventory, and I thought, wow, what I just did to Sean in that teaching meeting is the very concept from Atlas of the Heart that I want to talk about. And I controlled that moment, that conversation, instead of connecting to her. Now, I need you to know I went back to make amends to her. She didn't care one bit. She did not think about it later. She has bigger problems and better people in her life. It did not affect our relationship whatsoever, so it's all good. But this is the concept. And this is a concept that stands out because it's not talked enough about in the world of psychology. Only a couple people have talked about it. And so I know now that Brene Brown is talking about it, it will get out. And this is the concept. And this is a Buddhist thought and practice. And it says that while of the far enemy of connection is disconnection, that the near enemy of connection is control. So enemy in this has to do with anything that opposes you being you. It's anything that weakens your internal system. And so it's very obvious to think that the far enemy would be disconnection. That makes sense. But the near enemy is something that undermines what you're trying to do in the relationship. It becomes more about control. And control means that you are in charge. You're controlling how close you get to somebody and how close they're able to get to you. And we do it so much and we're taught it at such a young age, we don't even realize we're doing it. A near enemy is pitying somebody instead of giving them compassion. It's people-pleasing, which is controlling the outcome instead of actually connecting compassionately to each other. And so to really look at this quote, I really want to put the scripture, Proverbs 3:5, right beside it. And that is, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Because if we're going to look at the outlets of the heart, that's a collection of maps. Your first map, your first internal operating system happened from embryo on, particularly in the first 18 months of your life. And we don't even know that that's how we understand relationship because it's been there so long. So your first internal operating system dictates how you hear, how you see, and brings in the map of emotions. If you're allowed to have emotions, if emotions are considered weakness, or if you're taught you have to hold other people's emotions. That a lot of us learn to put our trust in what we do for each other, not in each other. And so our first understanding can be actually what prevents us from being in a relationship. It will become a near enemy. So the first principle of near enemy that I want us to look at is attachment versus connection. And that's your internal operating system. So there's one type of connection, that's secure connection. Again, this is your lens of how you see self and others for the rest of your life. Unless you work on it, your childhood attachment will stay your earning mentality attachment. But it's a spectrum. You can move along the map and you can change this. But some people are raised with secure connection. And that means that they had a parent, a grandparent, someone around them that they could connect to the self inside of that parent. That parent was attuned to their needs and to their emotions. That they were taught how to co-regulate their life experiences. And so they were able to be in a map it's a two-way arrow. And so this goes into your adult life. This is how this is. So whatever it is for you, you can pay attention to it for now. It's really important. So it's a two-way arrow. And one of the best things, someone asked me before I got up here to use texting as an example. So if you've ever done a workshop with me about this or anything else, you've heard me do this. If someone's a secure connection will text you and you don't text back, they will think that you're probably okay and you'll get to it when you can get to it. All right, so here's the saying with this two-way street. Because there's lots of room when you have secure connection. There's less threat that takes you away from self because there's a lot of room for you and for them. So the trust is, I'm okay. I trust that you're okay. I trust you'll text me back when you have time. I trust that if there's a problem, you'll tell me that there is a problem. That's secure connection. Now, if most people have that, I would not have a job, and there's a lot of therapists in the first two rows that I can see. We would all not be as busy as we are. So, in some way, thank God for your parents for doing that. It works out, right? So again, we can learn the secure connection, but this is a two-way map. This is a two-way street for people. So this is a beautiful thing that we can learn. Most of us have an insecure attachment, not a connection, an insecure attachment. The first insecure attachment is called preoccupied. In the map you'll see with this is that there's no arrow going towards self, it's going towards the other person. And it's exactly what it sounds like, that you get preoccupied with someone else's emotions, with whatever they are experiencing. So as a child, you learn to neglect yourself. Your safety is in taking care of the weight of the environment, the emotions of other people around you. And so there's a lot of self-neglect. So emotions for people like this aren't safe to have themselves. They are constantly looking to see what your need is, what your emotion is, because that's their only map to know how to be in the relationship. They technically get taught people-pleasing as a way of connection. It's actually a near enemy. It's an attachment. So the texting that happens with them, that if they text me a novel, and they do, I will text back the answer, which is usually yes or no. And they will always, the next thing is something wrong? Are you upset with me? Because they're thinking they have to hold the weight. They can't trust that the answer really is just yes. Because they've been taught for so long that they have to hold the weight of all the environment of whatever's happening to somebody. So the next insecure attachment is called dismissive avoidant, and it's exactly that. It means that you got raised in a way that it's your emotions and what's happening, your needs got dismissed. That you're taught that they're weak. And so it becomes more about tasks. It becomes that my only way that I can feel okay about myself is that I will get a task done. That's the way people constantly stay in this state of having to do things better than someone else, work harder than someone else, be productive. And so their emotions or needs got dismissed as a child, so it becomes about self. Whereas preoccupied becomes, the one beforehand, becomes like, I'm not okay, but I'll make sure you're okay. It's the opposite if you're avoidant. It becomes, the map is that the arrow is pointing towards me, and it's not going anywhere else. And so as I'm okay, you'll figure it out. The trust goes into self and task in our own survival mechanisms, not in the other person. And so the last one I want to share with you is called disorganized attachment. And this is the map for that. There's no map. There's no map. This means as a child that there's most likely a great deal of abuse and neglect, that love and chaos got coupled for you, that trust and love got coupled for you. It means that as an adult, when there's a threat, when something happens, that you don't know where to step, you don't know what to do. And then for a lot of us, the only thing that makes sense in the moment actually is self-harm. Because with preoccupied, there's a place to step. With dismissive avoidant, there's still a place to step. There's an idea of what I can do to be okay in this relationship, even if it's just control. But with disorganized, when there's abuse, really don't know what to do next. And don't know how to do it in a way that takes care of me or you. So the statement to remember about this is that I'm not okay and you're not okay. And this means I don't have trust in me and God and you. I don't have trust in anything. I just know how to hurt myself. See, the map that comes into this internal operating system, that whatever you've taught about emotions as a child and at other stages of your life, that especially if it's shame and that starts fueling what's behind that, if you are not taught to release your emotions, you will cycle it. And that becomes behavior. And so that may be nail biting. Because when you think you have to be perfect and you can't get your emotions out, it has to go somewhere. People bite their nails. They do trichomania. They pull hair out. They skin pick. They do obsessive compulsive behavior because they don't know how to connect. Instead, they just know how to attach. And with disorganized, this isn't always true. A lot of us have disorganized attachment go into alcoholism, drug addiction, sexual addictions. Because again, there's no map. There's no way of regulating what's happening. So what happens is that productivity, perfectionism, performance, people-pleasing, all near enemies become our way of navigating relationships, but it won't let us connect in the relationship. Our trust goes into the role, not into the relationship. And that is why it's important for us to learn how to lean on what we don't understand. So when Sean was up here 2 weeks ago, she kicked off this series and did a great job. And she talked about her mom. And I thought she was talking about my mother. She describe my mother verbatim. And I know what you're thinking, that that's impossible because Sean's mom is Latinx. Well, so is mine. Still mad that I don't look like my mother. Still mad about that. But my mother, just like Sean's, is agoraphobic. I've had great pity for my mom in her life because she doesn't understand the language and she never adapted to being in this country or could figure out how to handle being treated the way she was treated in this country. And pity of her got me nowhere, just to let you know, again, that's a near enemy. And just the lack of understanding of language and how to interact. And so my mom had a disorganized attachment with me. I did not have a disorganized attachment with my dad. That is my saving grace. She did not know how to connect to me. And so for me, trust and love and abuse and love got very intermingled for me. So that carries into your adult life, and I'm going to give you 2 examples in my life what it looks like. So went to my parents' house, and there had to be a reason. I don't just show up. So I don't remember why I was there. But the whole family was there. My brother, his wife, his kids, everybody was there. And my mom went and pulled out all these gifts. And she gave every single person there a gift, but me. And so I went, what about me? And she said, well, I didn't know what to buy you. Just a side note, you can always give me cash, y'all. I'm just telling you. Like, I'll take it any day. You don't have to put it in a card, either. You can just hand it, not even an envelope. You can just hand it to me. I'm fine with that. And so I remember I pulled her aside afterwards, and we talked about that. And so out of her own guilt, shame, whatever she was experiencing in that moment, after giving everyone a gift but me, she gave me a certain amount of money. And I remember I took that money and went and got a bicycle. And so soon after that, I went back to my parents' house. And at this point, I was very deeply in an eating disorder. And so I remember, and I had no idea why I did this. I know now. So I went there, and I went in their backyard, and I swam laps. And then I finished doing that, and I went inside their kitchen, and I ate some of their food, and then I went and purged it. And then went back out, got on the bike that she had just donated $500 to, and I rode the bike. I came back from that, and then I went for a run and came back. And then I left. It took me a long time to understand what I was trying to do in that. But I needed her to see me. See, I wanted her to ask me, are you doing this to yourself because of me hurting you? I wanted her to see my suffering. See, compassion means we suffer with. And so if we don't have a good definition of compassion, we'll use it in the wrong way. I was using it to hurt myself. I wanted her to see that I was suffering. If she saw that suffering, maybe then she'd give me some compassion. But I was expecting incredibly healthy behavior from an incredibly unhealthy woman. So she couldn't see me. See, it would be great if we could change other people. It'd be great if we could get them to see that they're hurting themselves or hurting us, and that would cause change. But what we need to do instead, because that will never happen, is compassionately confront what their lack of change has done to us. How we can learn to give ourselves compassion and treat ourselves not in the same way that they treated us. The story in the Bible that I want to focus on that I think captures this really well is in John 8:2. We all know this story. This is a story of casting the first stone. But I'm going to read this to you. But early the next morning, Jesus, was back at it again in the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and he taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. The missing word there is allegedly. Put that in. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, all right, let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, till only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. See, when I read the Bible, I think about whoever's writing it, what's their attachment style. And I think about who they're writing about, what's their attachment style or connection. I'm sure everybody does that. That's really normal, right? Okay. So when I hear this, like these men who took this woman, they are all avoidant attachment style. They're all dismissive. They have no regard for her. They don't care about her. They don't have compassion for her. This is simply about them. They have found that religion, the 643 laws they obsessively have to deal with, becomes their way of thinking they're okay, no regard for anyone else. And that includes Jesus. They're trying to trip Jesus up. And we know that they are full of it because Hebrew law teaches that when you find someone in an act of adultery, you take the man and the woman and you bring them to the priest. And they have 2 witnesses that they saw it as well. And then the high priest would stoop down and write in the dust or somewhere that was not permanent, would write the name of the accused. They knew this. They just wanted to be right. And so I believe in this. It shows us that Jesus, who has secure connection, stoops down. And there's prophecy and prayer in Jeremiah that teaches what we believe, proves that what he stooped down and wrote actually was their names. Because they're the ones violating the law. There's no evidence this woman has done anything. There's proof in Jeremiah that they have heard since the age of 12 at the Day of Atonement. They've heard for years this prayer that says that there will be a time in front of the Messiah, that there will be a public embarrassment, and those who have turned away from Yahweh, their names will be written in the dust. And so the oldest ones have heard this prayer longer. And so the belief is that they were more familiar with it, and they see Jesus stoop down and write their names in the dust, and so they caught on and started leaving. And then Jesus, who's knowing what's inside of him for her, stands up and looks her in the eyes. And Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." And I think that means no one's throwing a stone at you. Stop throwing stones at yourself. Treat yourself well. That go and sin no more means go and take in the connection you just had with me, the compassion I just gifted you and handed you. Go and bathe in that and treat yourself well. And from there, that is how you treat others. That is secure connection. That is what we're called to. That's the compassion that changes each other. So Dr. Kristen Neff is a leading psychologist and expert out there about self-compassion. And I heard her speak, and she shared one story in particular, and this is a study that they did on people who had just gotten back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And so they did an experiment to see how well they did a year later with their post-traumatic stress syndrome symptoms. And so they figured the variable, the leading variable, if they got better or not, would be how much comeback they saw. But that's not it. It's actually how much self-compassion they had. It's actually based on how they treated themselves over what they saw and what they experienced when they were in Afghanistan. See, self-compassion, defined by Dr. Neff, self-compassion has to do with fierce accountability and fierce responsibility to herself. We're good at giving compassion to someone, warmth and kindness when someone makes mistakes. We're good at grace. But being able to acknowledge our own suffering and pain and treat ourselves warmly and kindly when we make a mistake or something doesn't go our way, that becomes a predictor of how well we do in relationships. And that the thing is to look and to make sure you're only holding what is yours to hold. That if your hands are empty and you're more of a dismissive, avoidant attachment, that someone else is holding the rest of your stuff. And then if you are more of a preoccupied attachment, then you're holding too much stuff. And just to learn through self-compassion to only hold what is yours. And then treat yourself well around whatever that is. So I'm going to share a story about my mom with y'all. But I want you to hear this, please. Please don't ever go around somebody that abuses you if you've got choice. Please don't hear what I'm saying as that I want you to go contact someone that abused you and think you're going to reconcile that. Particularly, we get obligated when it's family member. I don't care if they're family or not. Please don't go around people who don't treat you the way Jesus would treat you. It's not worth it. And if it's a church member, it's a church leader, and they still mistreat you, please don't think that's okay. And that is not what I'm about to tell you. So some of you may have heard me share this, but years ago after I got sober, I heard God say, I want you to start calling your mom and reconcile with her. And I said, you call her. You created her. You knew her first. I'm not calling her. And so God started working with me. But I need you to know that reconciliation with her didn't start with her. He had been reconciling me and with him for a long time. And I learned the value and the beauty of self-compassion. So I learned to never lose myself through talking to her. And so if there wasn't enough me, there wasn't enough self-compassion, I didn't answer the phone or I didn't call her. And it was a slow, methodical process that we were able to reconcile with each other. And then 4 years ago, at this point, we were reconciled and we were talking, and I have learned how to use my humor, which is sarcasm is my family's first language. We're all bilingual. We speak sarcasm first, true story. You can ask my wife. She's just not getting used to it. That we were able to have a relationship. And again, it's important that I treated myself well and I treated her well, but I treated me well. And we got to a point where we could talk and laugh and have a good time. And then she got sick 4 years ago. And this is how I knew she was sick. And just know my parents are still together. You probably think they're old because you look at me, but they're not. All right? They're very capable, good people. Well, Mom wasn't doing well. And so I went and got her some groceries, and a friend went with me. And I remember saying to my friend, hey, I'll text you when I'm done and tell you how much she criticized the items that I selected. So I got there, and she didn't criticize anything. She just said thank you. So I honestly knew something was wrong. I'm serious, y'all. I knew something was wrong. So I was incredibly concerned. I called my brother. My brother's name is Golden Child. True story. She loves that boy. Oh, my gosh. His name is Jimmy. We call him Jimmy, because she gets excited when she says his name, so she says it 3 times. True stories. It's ridiculous. It's cultural, too. So I said, you got to get your mom to do something. She's so physically sick. Something's wrong. 3 days later, my mom called me at 5 o'clock in the morning and said, hey, come get me. I need to go to the hospital. I need y'all to hear this. I hate this. See, I hate emotions. See, I became the person she called for care and compassion because I'd spent years with self-care and self-compassion. And I did not understand why she would pick me. Out of everybody, anybody, whether it's an ambulance or my dad was sitting right beside her. And she called me 45 minutes away and said, come get me. I need to go to the hospital. So I went and got her. And my dad was right there, and he said, I'll follow you. And I got my mom in the car. And I'm taking her, and I drive fast anyway, so I'm justified now. I'm flying to get to the hospital. And I'm just looking at her, and y'all, I want to give her compassion. But I don't know how to give this woman compassion. She abused me so much. And I don't know how to do it in this moment. So I thought, who do I love the most? And I thought about dogs. So I reached over, and I pet her in the head, and I said, good puppy, good puppy. And she shot me a dirty look, so I knew she was still in there. So I got her to the hospital, and she had pneumonia, and she was septic, and she had lost her hearing. You see, all these morning phone calls that I had called her, and all these things, and now they're asking her medical questions, and I have all the answers. And I got to be an instrument of peace in that moment. And I want you to know that when you are in the hospital, when you are mentally ill, it is different. So my mom thought, especially when she started getting her hearing back, and just know the whole time she's there, she's telling me I'm a horrible kid and I was difficult to raise, and she's just completely regressed and giving me a hard time, and I don't take any of it personally because, see, I've done the work. But she believes that the government is trying to put things into her IVs and they're trying to hurt her, so she's trying to get them to stop the medication, but she's got to get better. She's sick. And so they called me and talked to her. The one that she rejected, she called me in. And see, I don't have to understand what's happening. I'm just trusting in the Lord with all my heart. That I knew whatever God was doing, that I wasn't going to understand it at the time. I just have to keep showing up. And so I go to the hospital and I sit on her bed. And I start talking to her about why it's okay and trying to make this okay. And y'all, she reached out. She held my hand. And maybe that happens in your family, but not in mine. And I was able to love on her and stand in a moment where I could trust God with all my heart and not understand what was happening. And she couldn't completely understand because of her mental illness, and she still trusted enough. She trusted the God in me that she could see. And she let them finish the medication, and she got better. So please hear this. You are so much more than perfectionism, productivity, trying to please somebody. You're worth so much more than just attaching. We are here to connect and to experience the compassion that comes from a God who will stoop down and write the names of the accused, not you, when you have a need. A God that sees you for who you are and knows that you've been told that you don't measure up and doesn't agree with that. So I challenge all of us to do something today and each day to show God in some way, as we're trying to figure out with the things we don't understand, that we believe that God calls us worthy. And at some point, we'll truly agree with his love. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you that this is a beautiful spiritual community, that we put compassion above comprehension, Lord. But help us to learn how to really just lean into you. Whether we understand that we're worthy of love or not, God, help us just to keep leaning into you and to learn that we're worthy of that compassion. And from that place, we'll learn how to go out and share that with others. God, we pray against trying to control things. Instead, help us just to stand firm on your steadfast love. I pray all these things in your Son's name, the name of Jesus. Amen.